We're gonna go live there, and we're gonna go live there. All right, Randy, let me just start off with saying thank you for your time today in your oral history. We'll start with where were you born, and what about your basic family? Did your dad, mom, dad, brothers, sisters, any of them, and then did any of them serve?
I was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and first child of 6. And my father was a Marine at the tail end of World War II, and served on the USS Missouri, amongst other ships. And, my uncle was in the World War II in the Battle of the Bulge. So that's about the only military history I have. So I was one of the last ones drafted in 1972, and then I ended up enlisting. So I guess I was enlisted instead of drafted.
Well, okay. So with that type of entry into the military, what was your family's reaction to your service?
They were concerned, but they were for it because I come from a very patriotic family, and yeah, they backed me up all the way. So.
Yeah. Now, when we were talking, you had a little bit of an interesting story there. You were telling me you were on Isle Royal. Is that right?
Yeah, I was up on Isle Royal, which is way out in Lake Superior, closer to Canada, and the draft numbers came out, so I had to walk 7 miles into town to get a newspaper, and then I didn't look it up right away. I walked 7 miles all the way back and went up on the ridge and stared at Canada while I tried to find my number, and it took me 3 or 4 times to find it going through that paper, but my number was 14, so I kind of knew I was going no matter which way you look at it. But I was looking at Canada and I thought, my dad being a Marine and stuff, I thought I can't do this. This is not right, so I'm gonna just let the cards play out the way they play out. So
Very tempting, though, huh?
yeah, well, it wasn't,
So obviously, you say you enlisted into the service after your number was selected. In that, did you, in your dad being a Marine and stuff, did you ever look at other branches, or did you know right away you wanted the Army?
Well, I had a couple buddies that wanted to go into the Air Force, and so we kind of all 3 went down, and we're going to join the Air Force. And but then I just kept thinking about, maybe the Army is the way to go. And so yeah, I backed out of the Air Force and went and talked to the Army recruiter, and that's when I enlisted. So they ended up going in, and we all actually ended up going to Detroit for our physicals, and they ended up going to Texas, and I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Now, did you have a particular MOS that you were seeking out, or did you just feel like the Army was?
No, I wherever they put me, Vietnam was going on. That was where I was going to be. That's where I was going to be. So I didn't want to go, but I just, like I said, I just let fate take me where I was supposed to be. So it ended up going to Korea instead of Vietnam. So it was right at the tail end there.
Okay. Now, what was the MOS that you ended up getting then?
95 Bravo. That's military police. So.
Were you happy with that particular job?
Yeah, it was I thought it was a better job than being an infantry, but you're still kind of infantry. I mean, you're still pulling kind of the same duty, except you might have a Jeep instead of walking miles. So
Still gotta shrug it off, right?
yeah.
What was basic training like in the early 70s, towards the tail end of Vietnam?
That was tough. But I approached it to do the best that I could in basic, and a lot of guys would shirk doing push-ups and stuff, but I tried to do every single push-up that was thrown at me, and we had a good drill sergeant. He was a Vietnam veteran in Recondo, and he was tough. He was no nonsense tough. And while the other platoons in my company would march to the rifle range or up and down the hills, we had Heartbreak, and all those hills in Kentucky there were killers. He would make us march or run with our rifles above our heads and do it the whole way. And he just put these extra things on us that were tough. And I think we became the best platoon in that company because of that toughness. We I think we only failed a barracks inspection once. We came in first place every single time, and the other drill sergeants were kind of jealous of that. So they were trying to figure out what's making us the best.
As you look back at boot camp, what's one funny moment that sticks out to you?
A funny moment.
We weren't allowed to laugh, I know,
I know.
at the time. But when you look back, you just go, gosh, the stuff they made us do.
Yeah. I guess I didn't have to do it, but I guess a guy had to do push-ups with the bolt cutter because he lost the key to his locker. So he had to get a bolt cutter to cut the lock off. And then he threw the bolt cutter on the bed. Well, the drill sergeant came in and saw the unsecured bolt cutter, so he had to put it across his hands and do push-ups, and every time he went down he had to kiss that bolt cutter and tell it say, "I'm sorry, bolt cutter, for leaving you on the bed."
Oh, yeah.
Funny stuff like that.
Yeah, I have stories like that all the time.
Yeah.
Going through it was not funny at all, but now looking
No.
back on it, you're like, wow, the stuff they had us do. All right, so you get done with basic training. What's the next? Are you immediately put out in the general army, or do you can go on to more schooling?
We got on a buses, and went to excuse me. All the guys, they were going with me to Fort Gordon, Georgia, for MP training. So we left Fort Knox. Traveled all night, got to Fort Gordon. This was close to Christmas. It was like 1st of December or November sometime. And we thought it was going to be warmer, but we got there and it was freezing cold. So to Augusta, Georgia, and early morning. The sun wasn't even, just barely coming up, and we had to get off the buses. For some reason, they had so many guys going into military police at that time that they didn't have enough barracks for us. So I was put in a holding pattern 2 weeks where a lot of the guys did fixing up of the barracks and stuff. I chose to there was a sergeant, black sergeant, who was special forces, and he said he would train us in special forces stuff for 2 weeks. So I elected to do that instead of working on the barracks, to fixing the barracks up, just the painting and whatever. So I did that for 2 weeks, and that was pretty tough. We ran and ran and ran and ran wherever he was going, and he'd just teach us stuff, basic military stuff, but a lot more in depth, how to spot somebody in the jungle and stuff like that. How to eat grubs and worms and
the things you're looking at going, do I really need to know this?
Yeah, do I really need this? But it was better than painting barracks. I guess I wanted to be the best of the best. If I was in World War II, I'd have probably been an airborne or ranger training or something. But
yeah. So you said your deployment was to Korea. Did that surprise you? Were you prepared for Korea?
No. Originally it was supposed to be Vietnam, and then several of us got new orders to go to Korea because they were winding down and they were changing everything. So I hadn't gone. I was on my way to go call my mom and dad, tell them I was going to Vietnam, and they said go to the office there, and they had new orders to go to Korea, and I go, Korea? Where's Korea? So I wasn't surprised, but I thought, well, I knew it was by Japan somewhere, but I waited till after AIT. We got a 30-day leave to go home, so then I looked it up and found out where I was going.
Do you feel like you were prepared for Korea? Because I mean, climate-wise, terrain-wise, I would feel like it's so different than what Vietnam was, and obviously basic training, your AIT would have all been like, you're going to Vietnam. So
right.
Now you get this like little wrench and you're off to Korea where you're cold weather training. You didn't have that in
Yeah, we didn't have that, but I found out it was cold there, but it was also hot in the summertime. So
Okay.
It was a little like Michigan. It can be 90, almost 100 in Michigan, and colder than cold in the wintertime. So well, whatever. It's kind of same climate. I didn't know what I was going to do there. We went to San Francisco and flew into San Francisco to Fort Ord, and then ended up getting on a plane to fly to Fairbanks, Alaska, and then down to Osaka, Japan, and then from Osaka we went to Osan Air Base in Korea. So then got off the plane, and there's a archway there by the terminal, said land of the morning sun, I guess. So, and it stunk.
Well, so now, yeah, being in Korea is a little new for me. I knew that there's guys there, but knowing what they did, I don't. So could you explain to me what the daily workload for a military police officer was like in Korea at this time?
Well, I ended up going to Seoul and staying there for a couple days where they were getting our duty stations or whatever. And I ended up going to Waegwan, which was down by Daegu in Korea. But had no, still, they said you were going to be working on trains, being train guard. And my dad worked on the railroad for a while, so it was kind of neat, but still had no idea what we were going to do. So when I got down there, I was in the 260th MP company at the camp there, in Camp Carroll, and assigned to the train guard platoon. Well, this was something new. I was in on the ground floor. We hadn't even really started yet, but all the equipment coming out of Vietnam was being shipped to Okinawa, Philippines, Korea. So a ship would come in, or they'd take so many guys for how big the train was, or how big how many cars had military equipment on it, and then so many guys would go down to Chin Hae, which is down by Busan, by train, and then they were loading a cargo train, or just a regular freight train, and then we'd ride that train to wherever it had to go. And so it was kind of a nice job because I got to see every part of Korea. I didn't stay in one spot. So
Would you say Korea is beautiful?
I'd say it's beautiful.
Huh.
Mountainous. Very beautiful. Didn't smell very good because of the fertilizers on the rice paddies and stuff, but after a while you don't even smell it,
Did you enjoy the culture of Korea?
Yeah, I did enjoy the culture. The people were friendly, and very had a few incidences, but it was I really liked the duty there.
So as you're riding around on these trains, doing your daily job, what the military asked you to do, did you have a good feeling about what you were doing? And I guess I don't know if that's the best way to say that, but like, were you proud with your job, or did you feel like somehow you were like almost escaping? Like you had friends that obviously went to Vietnam, and you probably heard about what was going on down there and stuff. And then you were over here in Korea. I mean, yes, you're still doing your job and you're doing it to your best of ability, but did any of you like regret not being in Vietnam?
I don't think so. I think we were blessed to have what we had and to not be there. We did see some guys that we knew that later on came to Korea that went to Vietnam for a while, and they were not the same guys. And even though it was winding down and they were only there for 4 or 5 months, it had an impact on them. And they were so glad to be out of there. So we liked our job, liked doing what we were doing, and I wouldn't have minded staying there for another 6 months or so.
Did you ever work with the South Koreans or any other UN member nations for that matter? And then what was your role when you were working with them, if you did?
Yeah, we had what they called Katusas that worked with us. They were Koreans that were in the South Korean Army, and they were doing the same job we did. It was nice working with them because most of them knew English, so the translating would be easier when you're going to a town or going to a little shop to buy something or something. You take a Katusa with you and he could translate for you, and you'd learn a lot about the country too. One guy that I was paired up with for about the first 3 trips was a Korean who was adopted by a United States colonel, and he was taken to the United States and educated in our school systems, and then joined the Army when he got old enough and went back there. Knew perfect English and still knew, even from being a little boy, the Korean culture and stuff like that. So I learned a lot from Juan. He was a good guy. very dedicated. And, yeah, we had a good time together.
Were you able to stay in touch with him after your time in Korea ended?
No, he was in the train guards for a certain while, and then he went on to something else. I don't know where he went or.
The one curse, I guess, of the military, right? Like overnight, somebody could just disappear.
And they're gone, and you don't know where they went.
Yeah, if you stay around long enough, they say you'll eventually see each other again, but that's
Right.
if you stay around long enough. Well, thank you. Well, this will be an interesting one. Leave. Obviously, Vietnam, that would have probably been a little bit harder to get, but I'm thinking in Korea, you probably had readily leave. So what was that like, and what did you guys kind of do on leave? And by leave, I guess like your rest.
Just
time.
rest.
Yeah, like your time off.
Well,
You're not on duty.
Yeah, we weren't on duty all the time. We were in the barracks or in town, and we'd have to check the roster every day to see if we were going to be on another train. But it wasn't like you were working every day. Now, when you were on a train, that could be anywhere from 2 days to 10 days, depending on where it was going. And but then you'd come back, and usually our sergeant would, if you were on a 10-day trip, he'd give you several days off, before you got on to another one. But yeah, leave was just, we went to Taegu, we traveled around the immediate area there, and just hung out.
Was there like nightclubs and like bars and stuff like
Bars,
that?
nightclubs.
So it was a well-developed military kind of city. It wasn't just some little village out in the middle of some jungle.
It was a little village, but it was
yeah,
it was a military village.
Yeah, it had at least some of the refreshments that you could get for leave purpose. Yeah. Perfect. Do you think your time in Korea changed you as a person? And I guess we could even open that up to even being larger and say, do you think your time in the military changed you as a person? And was that a good change for you?
Oh, definitely. Made me mature. Made me more respectful. Before I went in the Army, I was kind of like a hippie. I was, went to the protests and rock and roll and whatever, it was a lot of partying. And when I went in the military, it just straightened me up and just made me more respectful and more, I think it made me a better person.
Well, how old were you?
I had more of a trying to plan my life, where before that time I had no plan for my life. And then after I got out, it's like, what am I going to do now? And I tried to first thing get a job and that stuff. And I think it helped me when I did get jobs. I was rarely called in sick, and I was there every day. So just stuff like that just makes you more aware of what you're supposed to be doing.
They don't give you sick days in the Army, do they?
No. You got to be really sick.
During your time in Korea, did you ever make friends? I know we talked about this a little bit with the one gentleman. And then what did you guys kind of like do as friends while you guys were in Korea? Both on duty and then off duty.
Yeah, we traveled around. We all had, it was a big thing back then. Everybody bought stereos from the PX. So you had a barracks full of stereos playing all kinds of different music. And excuse me. I had a couple of really close friends, and one died from cancer, and the other one lives down in Ohio. And we stay in touch. Gary and I stay in touch. Haven't seen too many of the other ones. We were tight as a unit. That's kind of one thing I regret, is that we were tight as a unit, but we didn't stay at tight when we got out. It was like never seen each other again, you know. And I always think I'm going to run into one of the guys sometime, you know, because I travel around a little bit here, and you know, I've seen Gary. I've been down and seen him. We're both into motorcycles and stuff like that. So, what we did on our off time, just, you know, bars, hanging out. We do things like build models and stuff, and just little activities like that.
You guys get good at cards?
Yeah, we cards, playing pool. You know,
Yeah.
we had pool tables and stuff. Yeah.
It's kind of hard to play pool by yourself, so
Yeah.
makes it a little bit easier there.
We had a little ice cream shop across our barracks was right on the edge of a athletic field.
Okay.
The ice cream shop was on the other side of the athletic fields. We hung out there quite a bit, playing pool, and they had a jukebox, and, you know, just a hangout place.
It's like the enlistment club, it sounds
Right.
like.
Yeah. Small. All I served was ice cream.
Don't eat too much of that.
No.
So I got to ask you kind of a little bit of a personal question here. Do you believe in luck?
No.
No. What then do you think kept you safe while in Korea? And I know we were talking right before we started actually recording. Korea was still a war zone. It was forgotten about during the Vietnam era, but this was still an active war zone. In any moment, you could have been the new front lines. So what do you think kept you safe then?
Well, as I got older, I started getting more and more into my faith, and I think God is real, and I think He kept me safe, because there's so many incidences where things could have gone bad and didn't, even in civilian life, and He had a plan for me, and yeah, I think he kept me safe.
Do you think you could give us an example of one of those instances when you were in the service? Again, it doesn't have to be necessarily in Korea, just during your time.
In the service, well, I got thrown off a train more than once just from the bouncing,
Okay.
and we were all over the trains. We were walking. You know, you see on TV these guys walking in boxcars and stuff. You know, that was all the time with us. You know, but once in a while these cars would start bouncing. Well, it was me and Gary. I remember we were going around a curve, and all of a sudden that thing started bouncing, and I threw both of us off, and we rolled down this hill, and then quickly got up and ran back. And it was just, and the train went around the curve and then into a tunnel which was probably 10 miles long, because you couldn't see the other end of it. And we just barely caught the caboose and had to jump on the caboose to get on that train again just before it went into the dark tunnel.
Wow.
So there was things like that.
Well, it sounds like
I can't really riding around in a Korean taxi cab was putting your life in danger. Those guys, when you meet on a mountain pass, somebody's going to go over that cliff. And it was so scary. But yeah, it was. Somebody was keeping his hand on us. stuff like that.
It sounds like your job was a little hazardous. At
It
times.
was hazardous at times, yeah.
Maybe walk us through some of that little bit of hazard. I know another thing you had talked about was sleeping on the trains, and you had an interesting story of some of the stuff that you slept on at times.
Yeah, we slept on bombs and artillery shells, ammunition, mortar shells, all kinds of stuff in crates, and even Agent Orange, barrels of that, which I think is part of my physical problems. But we had, what we liked is the trucks and the tanks and stuff. We could get inside and ride those. That was kind of fun. Did sleep on some missiles. Had a train load of missiles that we traveled at night. Slept. The train would stop inside caves to hide from the satellites. And it was interesting stuff that we guarded. And then there was also the Korean slicky, we call them slicky boys, would get on there and try to throw stuff off, you know. So you'd have to always chase them down. And there was some incidences where they got thrown off the train, and some of them didn't make it.
Wow. Yeah, I was just about to ask. I was like, was this like the Wild West? Was this like train robbers going on, but in Korea?
Yeah. Well, you didn't know if they were slicky boys or they were North Koreans. You didn't know, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we just had to keep the stuff we had safe. And some of it was junk. I mean, we had gondolas full of just parts. You know, it was like a junkyard, parts. But they'd get on there and they'd throw that stuff off and use it. But we kept them from doing it. So,
did you ever go toe in toe with one of those slicky boys?
I was with two guys that did, and that's one of the times where they held him down and waited for us to go across a train, a bridge across the river, and then they threw him off the train, and he hit the girders and ended up on a sandbar down below, and didn't make it because when we came back days later, he was still laying down there, and kids were poking him with sticks and stuff. And
Price of the job, right?
Yep.
So, looking back at your time in Korea, what do you think was your funniest memory of Korea?
Funniest?
Funniest.
Wow.
Or your top 5. We can do the top 5 too if that's easier. And again, going through it, I'm sure it wasn't funny at the time, but looking back at it, you're probably like, God, we were stupid.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. It wasn't really funny, but it was a terrifying time. A town attacked us one time.
Oh, okay.
Apparently they had a army base there that got shut down, and the people there were kind of ticked off. And we stopped there, and there was 10 of us on this train. Well, me and one of the guys went down into town, which sloped down from the train station, and got down to the intersection, and the taxi cab flew around the corner, stopped, guy got out, kicked the back window out, or the side window, one of the door windows, grabbed the glass and came at us with the glass. And so I had my nightstick out, and the other guy had a straight razor out, and he backed us all the way up to the train station, screaming and yelling. And then behind him, the whole town came after him with him. And when we got to the train station, us guys were in the middle of the train station, kind of in a circle, with our backs to each other. And this whole town just came through the train station trying to get at us. One guy got hit with a shovel. There were pitchforks and rakes and all kinds of stuff coming at us. And even the train conductors and people were fighting them off. And finally we went out and got on our train. And the train went down a ways and stopped. And me and Juan, the guy I was telling you about that was from Korea, we went down to the police station, and they had captured that guy that started it, and he was getting Korean justice down there, which isn't very good for a Korean. And they just wanted to know our side of the story, and so we told it, and then we got back on the train. Well, what happened was they put that town off limits. We could stop, we could go into the train station, but no further. And so that town was completely off limits. And several weeks later, I saw that guy that started it. He was outside the fence, and they had cut his hand off for coming at us and starting that whole thing. So he was crying and blaming us.
Was that alarming? I know listening to that story for me, the first thing that goes through is, I mean, we didn't necessarily win the Korean conflict, the Korean War, but I mean, South Korea exists because of Americans, you know, in our resolve and whatnot. So for there to be such pushback against the Americans, that's alarming to me. Was that a common theme throughout?
I think they were mad that they lost their jobs at the army base that was there, and so they were losing their
income,
and so they saw us and took it out on us, and we were just at the wrong place at the wrong time. So
more of an instance of happens, just wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah, wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I'm glad you made it through that. All right.
Yep. A few little injuries, but we made it.
So I've got to ask: do you attend any veteran organizations today? Do you ever?
Not really. I've participated in the wall, being set up here and there, and a while back, that was several years ago. It was a motorcycle deal too. So we escorted the wall from the casino into Grand Rapids, or South Grand Rapids area, up to a park, and then helped set it up, and just was there for as like a 3-day event. No, I haven't joined the American Legion or the VFW. If I would join anything, it would be the VFW.
Well, let's move on to a little bit of a lighter topic here.
Okay.
What do you think was the best part of your service?
Just the whole experience. I think I had really good jobs. Even when I got to Yuma, Arizona, I got out of the MPs because I had a disagreement with one of the sergeants, MP sergeants, and because I had driven a truck before I went in, they put me in the motor pool, which I ended up driving the pass bus 30 miles into town.
Yeah.
And hauling these guys back and forth from town. And the one good thing about that job was I didn't have to wear a uniform. So I wore cutoffs and, in hot desert. And they were mostly, I'd take them in there sober and bring them back inebriated. So that was a fun job.
I've never personally been to Yuma, but every one of my guys that I know that have been there said they hated that place.
Yeah, it's kind of a spot in the desert out there.
They said it was in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it truly is. They,
So
have a Marine base there too. With
Oh yeah, of
jets
course,
and stuff.
of course they do. Was that all that you did when you were in Yuma? Then was just bus driving?
Yeah, I worked in the motor pool for a couple weeks, and then I drove a big bus around the base, which was boring as I could get. And and then this job opened up to run the pass bus into town. So that was good because I'd parked the bus at the regular Greyhound bus station, and me and another Army buddy of mine down there ended up getting an apartment 3 blocks away from the bus station. So I'd have to drive the bus in, park it there, and wait 3 hours before I drove it back. So I'd go down to my apartment and hang out for a while. It was a pretty gravy job.
Yeah, you get some jobs can be lucky like that,
Yeah.
huh? Did you ever experience anything unusual during your service? Like, I'm trying to think. I had a rogue wave once when I was deployed that hit the ship that was just out of nowhere. Did you ever experience like something unique, random, unplanned in your event? And then how did you deal with that?
Can't really say anything happened like that.
Or even it could be someone just runs in there, just does something humorous in your bunk as you're laying there one night.
Well, we had some of the brothers got upset one night, and one of them came up, and this was early on, and came through and flipped all our bunks upside down with us in them. He was torqued about something. I don't even know what it was now, but everybody got all upset, and it was kind of a barracks brawl. It wasn't really a brawl, but a lot of hollering and screaming. There's a lot of weird incidences. We were always fearful of a train being derailed, and one had been derailed, which they had pictures in the Stars and Stripes magazine, newspaper, and luckily none of our guys were on it, but that was always a fear that you'd get derailed.
Yeah, hauling around missiles and tanks and
all kinds of equipment.
Agent Orange, and if it
Bombs. We went to a lot of air bases with bombs.
I could see why derailment might be a little bit of a fear.
Even though they didn't have the fuses on them, they just had eye hook on there, but it was hard to sleep on. Eye hooks.
Well, and they're still heavy as all get out, so even if it doesn't detonate, just rolling on you could be a bad day.
There was a humorous. I got a humorous story. In the wintertime, we kind of sleep in or congregate in the caboose because it's too cold, and there are a lot of tunnels in Korea. Well, when this train would go into a tunnel, it was pitch black. I mean, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face, and there was always an engineer in there in the caboose. So we'd play mind games with them, we'd all sneak out the door, and then when the king came out of the tunnel, he's the only one in there, and he's looking around, we're looking in the windows, and then he'd go into another tunnel, and then all of a sudden we'd be back in there. He just didn't know how we were coming and going without him hearing it. It was kind of funny.
Well, I'm sure if you're especially like a 10-day trip, I mean, you would probably get pretty monotonous. So you'd have to do whatever you could. You get tired of playing cards and everything else that you could do to entertain.
Hard to play cards on top of a train when it's moving.
Yeah. Well, and
we'd horse around. Luckily, more of us didn't fall off it. But.
You were explaining it too earlier about how the movement from car to car, because they would pack them so full, you guys had to go up on top. Was there like a walkway up there for you guys?
No.
It was just smooth metal?
It's round. They did have a flat spot right in the center that you could walk on. But on the passenger trains, we got good at riding passenger trains for free because we could go between the cars, climb up on top, and the conductor would come through punching tickets, and once he got through, then we come back down again. But yeah, we would do things like that, ride for free. And got caught once, got thrown off the train out in the middle of nowhere. But when a freight train came by, we'd hop on that and take it. You know,
You became essentially a hobo then.
that's kind of what we were. We were called train rats. That's my tattoo I got on here.
Oh, okay.
The rat.
Okay.
Train rats. And so, yeah, that's kind of what we were as hobos.
Armed hobos.
Because, yeah, we grew our hair a little longer. You know, when you're on a train for 10 days, a lot of beards got grown out a little bit.
Well, yeah, you have no way to shave, no way to...
Yep, so.
Well, how was it like staying in touch with your family and your friends? Because obviously, you being in Korea, you having a set base, even once you were done with your train rides or whatnot, you still had a certain place. So I imagine you could get mail. I imagine you could send mail. I imagine you could communicate fairly easy. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. We got cookies and care packages and stuff from home. Shared it with all the guys. They did the same. You know.
Was that a big morale boost for you guys over there to kind of be able to stay connected like that, even though you're thousands of miles away?
Yeah, we always look forward to mail. I had a girlfriend at home. She wrote me quite a bit, sent pictures, and I'd send pictures back.
Yeah. Was it pretty regular? Could you like set your clock to like when mail was?
Yeah, it was every day, whether you got some or not. Obviously, if we were out for a few days, you'd come back and you'd have some mail stacked up. But I was always looking forward to that.
Yeah, that little touch of home.
Touch of home,
Yeah.
A lot of guys did take 30-day leaves when they went over there and went home, but I didn't. I stayed there for the whole 13 months. And actually kind of would have wanted to stay longer, but I don't know, I had just as much good time in Yuma, Arizona as I did over there too, so.
Now, was it just one deployment is what you did in Korea, correct?
Yeah, one deployment. I did end up at the tail end the last 3 months or so. I ended up going down to the there was a base right on in Busan on the bay, and that's at the docks and stuff. It was the food depot of all the military in Korea. They had refrigerators after refrigerated units stacked up there. They had a full lumber yard. They had, just basically everything that the Army would use came out of that depot. And so I ended up spending the last 3 months there riding around in a Jeep, guarding it, which wasn't much because it was walled in, barbed wire, and then they had towers which had Korean security guards in all the towers and stuff. So it was not really a bad thing.
Yeah. Crazy to hear that they had guard towers around the food supply.
Yeah. Well, from what we hear, there was a lot of pillage going on, I guess you might say. Some of the security guards were in on that.
Well, sure. I mean, I can imagine the Korean people looking at that massive storage, as you were explaining it, refrigerator after refrigerator to refrigerator unit, and going, well, I could probably use a little bit of that.
Well, one of the bad things was we were part of kind of doing it too, because our mess hall there served nothing but hot dogs, hamburgers, and sauerkraut day after day after day. And here we are sitting on the whole food depot of Korea. We had refrigerated units full of steaks, which obviously went to Seoul for the, higher ups. So a few of them steaks got this. we bought our own little hot plates and ovens and stuff like that. and we'd have steak cookouts once in a while.
Oh man. Do you recall the day your service ended, and where were you when your service ended?
Yuma, Arizona.
Yuma, Arizona.
And I hadn't worn a uniform in months, and I had to put on a uniform for that day. And went in and signed out. And the thing of it was, I was kind of in a predicament because I had bought a '51 Chevy car that had transmission problems. So I had the transmission being fixed in Yuma. The car was at the base in our auto repair thing up on the hoist, and I could not get this guy in town to finish that transmission. So I had to kind of stay on the base for a while after I got out. So I had guys make me a meal card, and I lived in one of the barracks rooms for about a month after I got out, and I'd eat in the mess hall, and nobody really knew I was out, in or out. So I stayed there until I got that transmission, put it in that Chevy, and then I was out of there. Gave another guy a ride home who lived up in Wisconsin, but
Can't go very far without a transmission.
no, and that was a nice car. I wish I would have never sold it. So.
And that's what you did, was drive all the way back to Michigan?
Yep, drove all the way back to Michigan in that car.
Awesome.
That was one of my toys that I came back with.
Well, because you were serving during the Vietnam era, I know this was towards the end, and correct me if it wasn't quite this way, but did you have a bad reception returning home? You hear the horror stories of guys getting spit on, people calling them baby killers. What was it like to finally come back? I mean, to your home.
It was different. It was I didn't have the spitting and the protesting going on, but the fact was nobody would talk to me, and nobody would sit near me. And I flew into San Francisco Airport and had quite a layover there, and I sat in that terminal, and nobody would sit on that bench next to me, and it was like they avoided me because I was in uniform. And the one guy that did sit down and talk to me was going to, they call it Al-Anon or something. It was a drug rehabilitation thing. So he was basically a prisoner, and had a guy there escorting him. And so he sat down, and he's the only guy that talked to me, and we talked for quite a while. But I got on a plane. Everybody I sat next to wouldn't talk to me. So I kind of got this feeling that nobody wants to talk to somebody in the military. So ended up coming all the way home that way.
Did that hurt?
It was different, but I did feel like, I felt like nobody wants to talk to a military guy. It kind of hurt.
So when you got out, were you aware of any of the VA benefits, any of the VA help? Was the VA helpful for you at all?
Yeah. Not like they are now. I did get a VA loan for my first house I bought, but basically it was, I just didn't tried to pursue it a little bit, but I can't even tell you where the VA office was. So,
Were you aware of the GI Bill?
yep. And I was going to enlist in school. That's after I got married and get some, but then life got in the way, kids. I just never ended up going to school. I did a correspondence course through Chicago Institute for drafting for about a year, and did well in that, but it was work on my own, send it in, and they'd grade it, send it back. I passed the first year, but after that I didn't pursue it anymore. So yeah, that's one of my regrets, is not using the GI Bill to get some schooling.
How would you classify or say your adjustment to civilian life was?
It took a while. I didn't know it then, but I had PTSD. I think everybody does. Just like the feeling that you just don't fit in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all my friends and everything were 2 years ahead of me in their lives and doing things. And yeah, I kind of stayed to a couple friends of mine. If I go anywhere to a party or something, I just remain quiet. But there was a lot of guys that did congratulate me for being home and stuff like that. So eventually it passed. But I can remember probably the first 2 weeks, I didn't leave my parents' house. I just didn't want to go anywhere or do anything.
But it wasn't because you didn't feel safe.
No, I just didn't feel like I fit in.
Yeah, you felt like that black sheep, so to speak. Yeah. I even had that when I came back a little bit. I think war changes you in a way that you do stand out.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't even.
You're doing something different that everybody that you know doesn't relate to. Mm-hmm. You know, and so yeah, there's not really anything you can talk about. So.
So looking back, some 50 years later, that's unfortunately how long it's been. Mm-hmm. Do you think your time in the service, changed how you interacted with people and the overall relationship you have with them?
I think so. I think it made me more outgoing, more confident. I guess before I went in the service, I felt kind of like a failure. Back then, it's hard to get a job. I did finally get a job and worked there 3 months, and then it got drafted and stuff. So, but yeah, I was more introverted, I think, back then than I did when I got out. Even though for a while there, I was kind of introverted because of probably PTSD. But after a while, after everybody, you start mingling in with everybody again, and then you feel more confident. I know I was in a lot better shape than a lot of my friends. So.
After going to Korea, training to be in Vietnam, training for war, has it changed your opinion and feelings about warfare today? And if it hasn't, has it reinforced your feelings and your opinions of warfare?
Yes and no. I've got 2 sons. Yes, I would like to see them go into the military. no, I would not like them to be in a war situation. Because I've done a lot of military. Like my bookshelves are full of military books, and war is not something that anybody should hope for. It's the worst. But yeah, as far as military service, I think it would help them to be a little more respectful and grow up, you might say. And, yeah, because it did do that with me.
It helps you.
And everybody I know that went in, except that one buddy of mine.
It's very quick to let you know you were a cog in a much larger machine, but without
Right.
you, that machine doesn't work.
Right.
And that's what it teaches you, at least from my perspective. You know.
Right, and it teaches you teamwork,
Mm-hmm.
and to be no man is an island.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really do things all by yourself. Sometimes you're gonna have to have help.
And then, it's also got the incredible memories, right?
Yeah,
Once in a lifetime type of stories and experiences, obviously.
yeah, the travel, the lifetime experiences, and stories I can tell to people. You know, the one funny story I told you last time you were here was throwing a can of pork and beans or whatever and hitting a farmer,
Yep.
Korean farmer, in the head. I wasn't aiming for his head, but it laid him out instantly flat in that rice paddy, and I thought, oh, I killed him. And he jumped up and he was dancing and holding that can up high. Even though his blood coming out of his forehead, he loved that can.
Well, as this interview winds down, Randy, is there anything else you would like to include in your oral history?
I wish the VA would be a little more responsive to like Agent Orange and stuff, because I've got a lot of medical problems, and every time I try to get some, I guess you would say, not help with it, because I am getting help, but
Investigation.
or retirement disability or something for my wife even to hold on to. It just goes nowhere, and they throw it out because the dates were wrong. I know for a long time Korea wasn't on the list, but they put it on the list now, and but it only goes up to 71. Well, they were still getting barrels of that stuff after 71. I know that for a fact. And every camp was using it around the perimeters and stuff, especially up the DMZ. That no man's land there was all defoliated, so, and that's where we took most of it. So, but it is what it is.
So we're going to fast forward, say it's like 200 years from now, and only your oral history, for whatever reason, lasts. What would you want that historian or researcher to know about your service in the U.S. military and about you being in Korea in particular? What is one thing that would stand out?
That Well, that we were there to defend the Korean Peninsula. That was made back in 1950 when the North Koreans attacked, and it didn't stop with the signing of the armistice, because I was up at the DMZ, and it's still like a war zone up there. There's still incidents of shooting back and forth, and I know the South Koreans love their freedom, and we made it happen. Vietnam, I think we ended up quitting Vietnam because of political pressure, and just we got tired of that war, just like Afghanistan. We got tired of that one, pulled out. Well, where's it going to go? Right back to where it was in the beginning. I don't think that's the answer for every country, but it is working in South Korea. And I guess I was just happy to be part of that for the 2 short years I was there, or 2 short years I was in. 200 years from now, I don't know, things will be a lot different.
It's always interesting to think about that question, isn't it?
Yeah.
You
We
think
could be fighting on our own soil by that time.
I wish I could have been around with like the Revolutionary soldiers and asked that
Yeah.
question, where they thought in 200 years, 1976, what do you think we would need to know?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows what they would have said? It's an interesting thing the Oral History Project gives us a chance to do.
Right.
Last question, and I'll let you go for the day. Often history is written by the victor. In the case in Vietnam in particular, the American government would say that this was a failed conflict. Would you agree with this statement or disagree with it? Why or why not?
I agree to the fact that we failed in doing what we should have been doing. We tried, but the politics of it just wouldn't let the military win. And so why was that? Was that just to make millions of dollars off of the whole thing? It was just the way that thing was fought. To take ground and then give it back, and take ground the next day and give it back, take ground. What is that? That's just a waste of lives to me. And I think we should have maybe pulled out a long time before that. Or not even gone in there. It was a noble cause, but it just didn't work out because of people were sick of war, I think, from World War II and Korea, and they didn't want another one. But we're still having them.
Would you say Vietnam, Korea were both part of that domino theory? That's what they played. The bigger reason for America's involvement was that fear of communism and taking over maybe the South Pacific?
Yeah, I think that was the big, I don't know if that was a lie, but it was a big selling point for that war. You don't see it happening now after Vietnam was taken over. You don't see the other countries falling, but socialism is getting more prevalent nowadays. And,
I know I said that was the last question, but I promise this will be the last one.
Yeah.
How did you feel then when the wall fell? You know, that because I mean, again, that was the whole Cold War, that coming down, the Vietnam, your time in Korea. That was
Right.
kind of an ending to that. Did that make it feel successful then?
Yeah, that was a success, I think, with Reagan and was it Brezhnev?
Gorbachev.
Gorbachev. Yeah, I think that was successful because it did free that whole area up for being oppressed. Now they could travel back and forth and get jobs wherever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that worked, but
Did it kind of like recharge you though for like, okay, the wall fell, my time in Korea, us going to Vietnam, us fighting in Korea was worth something. We did actually get to the end, even though the wall wasn't in Korea per se,
right.
but that at least showed like we did beat communism. What we set out, one of the bigger umbrellas that we set out to fight, was that there
Right.
at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we did hold them in check there. It's too bad we couldn't have done that in Vietnam, but yeah, I don't know what went wrong there, but politics or just people got sick of the war.
Well, Randy, I want to thank you for your time today with this oral history. It was a pleasure recording this. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Stop that.
It's my pleasure.